The Valari Empire had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their silver skin and tall bodies made them look like gods to the younger species of the galaxy. They had conquered worlds, built great cities on 100 planets, and believed themselves to be the greatest civilization in existence. But now they were afraid. The Kreth swarm had appeared from the dark spaces between galaxies. They were insect creatures, billions of them, moving from star to star and eating everything in their path. Whole planets disappeared. Entire species went extinct. The Valari, for the first time in their long history, were losing a war. Their solution was simple and cruel. They would use the primitive species of the galaxy as shields. Let the weak die first. Let their bodies slow down the Kreth while the Valari prepared their real defenses. Earth was on there. List Una Park was 32 years old when the ships appeared over Seoul. She was a lieutenant in the Korean army, a woman who had spent her life serving her country. She had never imagined she would be forced to serve aliens. The Valari gave Earth a choice that was not really a choice. Send soldiers to fight in their war, or watch their cities burn from orbit. The governments of Earth had no power to resist. They agreed Una was selected in the first wave. So were 200 other Korean soldiers. They were taken from their bases, separated from their families, loaded onto transport ships like cargo. Captain Do-yeon Kim was the senior officer among them. He was 40 years old, a quiet man with sad eyes. He had served in the military for 20 years and had seen many difficult things. But nothing had prepared him for this. The transport ship was cold and gray. The Valari gave them small rooms with hard beds. They gave them food that tasted like nothing. They gave them weapons that were old and cheap, plasma rifles that the Valari military had thrown away decades ago. On the third day of travel, Do-yeon gathered his soldiers in the cargo bay. They stood in lines, their faces showing fear and anger and confusion. Some were young, barely 20 years old. Others were veterans like himself. All of them had been taken from their lives without warning. "I will not lie to you," Do-yeon said. His voice was calm but heavy. "They do not expect us to survive. We are not soldiers to them. We are sacrifices." A young woman in the front row checked her plasma rifle. Her name was Ji-soo-han. She was 23, a private who had joined the army to pay for her education. She had been studying to become a teacher. Now, she was studying how to kill aliens. "Then we changed their expectations," Ji-soo said. Do-yeon almost smiled. "Yes, that is exactly what we will do." The Valari liaison officer was named Counselor Thren. He was tall, even for his species, with silver skin that seemed to glow in the ship's lights. He looked at the humans the way a person might look at insects. There was no respect in his eyes, only cold calculation. "You will be deployed to Karo 7, Thren told them. "A frozen world on the edge of Kreth territory. Your mission is to hold the eastern defensive line." Una stepped forward. She had been studying the Valari language since the moment she was taken. She understood more than they realized. "The eastern line," she said. "That is where the Kreth attacks are strongest." Thren's silver eyes narrowed. He had not expected a human to understand strategy. "Correct," he said after a moment. "The eastern line has a 73% casualty rate. Your survival is unlikely." "You mean impossible?" Una said. "You are sending us to die." "I am sending you to serve the Empire." Thren's voice was cold. "Your deaths will buy time for Valari forces to establish stronger positions. This is the purpose of auxiliary units." Una felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her face calm. She had learned long ago that showing emotion to enemies was a weakness. "We understand," she said. Thrn seemed satisfied. He turned and walked away, his long legs carrying him quickly out of the cargo bay. When he was gone, the soldiers began to talk among themselves. Some were crying, others were cursing. A few sat in silence, their eyes empty. Sergeant Taiwu Lee pushed his way to the front. He was a big man, 45 years old, with rough hands from years of construction work before he joined the army. He was not an educated man, but he was smart in ways that mattered. "I've been looking at the maps," Taiwu said. "The terrain data they gave us. There's something they missed." Yuna turned to him. "What? The ice shelf on the northern edge of our position? It's unstable. The geological surveys show fracture lines throughout the whole structure." Corporal Minji Choi stepped forward. She was 26, an engineering student who had been forced into the army. Her mind worked differently than most people. She saw patterns where others saw chaos. "Resonance," Minji said, her eyes lighting up. "If we concentrate fire at the right frequency, we could trigger a collapse. The ice would do the damage for us." Doyen looked at them both. For the first time since they had been taken, he felt something like hope. "They gave us bad weapons and a death sentence," he said. "But they forgot something important." "What?" Jisoo asked. "We are human." Doyen's voice was stronger now. "Our ancestors survived ice ages with stone tools. They crossed oceans in wooden boats. They built civilizations from nothing." He looked at each of his soldiers. "The Valari think they know war. They have fought with advanced technology for thousands of years. But we have fought with everything. With rocks. With sticks. With our bare hands. War is in our blood." Yuna nodded. "They expect us to follow their rules. To die in neat lines like good soldiers. But we won't," Taiwu said. "No." Yuna's voice was hard as steel. "We will fight like humans. And we will make them regret ever dragging us into their war." The transport ship continued through the darkness of space, carrying 200 humans toward a frozen world and an almost certain death. But inside that ship, something was changing. Fear was becoming anger. Despair was becoming determination. The Valari Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had looked at humanity and seen weakness. They had seen primitives with short lives and crude technology. They had not seen the fire that burned inside every human heart. They had not understood that humans did not know how to surrender. They did not know how to accept death quietly. They were about to learn. Korosavin was a world of ice and death. The sky was always gray. The wind never stopped screaming. The temperature was so cold that exposed skin would freeze in minutes. The humans stepped off the transport ship and felt. The cold cut through their thin uniforms like knives. The Valari had not given them proper winter gear. Why waste resources on soldiers who would be dead within days? Yuna pulled her collar tight against her neck and looked at the landscape. White ice stretched to the horizon in every direction. Mountains of frozen rock rose in the distance. Somewhere out there, the Kreth were coming. "Beautiful," Taiwu said, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air. Mingi looked at him like he was crazy. "It's a frozen wasteland." "Yes," Taiwu smiled. "And we're going to use every part of it." The Valari commanders positioned the human auxiliary unit at the weakest point of the eastern defensive line. It was a gap between two mountains, where the Kreth always attacked first. Previous units stationed there had lasted an average of 6 hours. The Valari expected the same from the humans, Captain. Doyan established their base in a series of ice caves near the gap. It was not comfortable, but it provided shelter from the wind. More importantly, it was hidden from the air. "We'll come at dawn," Yuna said, studying the tactical data on her old datapad. "That's the pattern. The Kreth attack when the temperature is lowest. It slows down Valari soldiers, but the Kreth don't feel cold." "How many?" Jisoo asked. She was checking her plasma rifle for the 20th time. The weapon was old and unreliable, but it was all they had. The last attack had 30,000. Yuna's voice was flat. "We have 200 soldiers and weapons that might not work." Silence filled the cave. 30,000 against 200. Those were not odds. Those were a death sentence. Taiwu spread his map on the frozen ground. He had marked the ice shelf in red with lines showing the fracture points. "Here," he said, pointing. "If we can trigger a collapse here, the whole northern approach becomes impassable. That forces the Kreth into a narrower corridor." Minji nodded, her mind already working on the problem. "We need to calculate the exact frequency. The ice responds to vibration. If we coordinate our fire, hitting the same points at the same rhythm, we can create a resonance effect." Like breaking a glass with sound, Doyen said. Exactly, Minji pulled out her datapad and began writing equations. Give me 2 hours. 2 hours later, she had the answer. The Valari observers laughed when Yuna explained the plan. The senior observer, an officer named Commander Velos, shook his silver head. This is primitive nonsense, he said. You cannot collapse an ice shelf with infantry weapons. The physics are impossible. With respect, Commander Yuna replied. You don't understand our physics? Velos waved his hand dismissively. Do as you wish. It will not matter. You will all be dead by noon. He walked away, still laughing. Dawn came. The sky turned from black to gray. The wind grew even colder, and then the Kreth appeared. Jisoo saw them first. Dark shapes, moving across the ice, thousands of them, their hard shells gleaming in the weak light. They made a sound as they moved, a clicking and chittering that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Contact, she reported, her voice steady despite her fear. 30,000 plus. Coming fast. Yuna raised her hand. Everyone to positions. Wait for my signal. The humans spread out along the defensive line. They were thin and few, tiny figures against the vast white landscape. The Valari observers watched from a safe distance, already preparing their casualty reports. The Kreth came closer. 500 meters. 400. 300. Ready, Yuna said into her communicator. All units, target the marked coordinates. Fire on my command. The Kreth reached 200 meters. Yuna could see their faces now, if they could be called faces. Mandibles and compound eyes and hunger. Always hunger. Fire. 200 plasma rifles fired at once. Not at the Kreth, but at the ice shelf to the north. The beams hit the fracture points that Minji had calculated, striking in perfect rhythm. The Kreth kept coming. 100 meters now. The Valari observers began to shake their heads. The humans were wasting ammunition on ice instead of defending themselves. Again, Yuna shouted. Fire. Another coordinated volley. The ice began to groan. Deep cracks appeared, spreading like lightning across the white surface. The Kreth were 50 meters away. Jisoo could smell them now, a chemical stink that made her stomach turn. One more time. Yuna's voice was desperate. Everything you have. The third volley hit the ice. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world broke. The ice shelf collapsed with a sound like thunder. 1 billion tons of frozen water and rock fell down, down into the valley where the main Kreth force was advancing. The ground shook so hard that humans and Kreth alike fell to their knees. When the dust cleared, Yuna looked at the battlefield. The northern approach was gone, buried under a mountain of ice. And beneath that ice, 30,000 Kreth warriors were dead. The remaining Kreth, confused and leaderless, turned and ran. Jisoo stood up slowly, her legs shaking. Around her, other humans were doing the same. Some were laughing. Some were crying. Some just stared at the destruction in silent amazement. Casualties? Doyen asked. Taiyu checked his communicator. 12 wounded. None dead. 12 wounded. Against 30,000 enemies. On the Western Front, the Valari regular units had lost 600 soldiers fighting a smaller Kreth force. Commander Velos stood frozen, his silver face showing emotions that humans had never seen on a Valari before. Shock, confusion, and underneath it all, the beginning of fear. Yuna walked up to him. She was covered in ice and dirt, her uniform torn, her face red from the cold. But she was alive. Her people were alive. Possible, Velos whispered. The physics. It should not have worked. You do not understand us, Yuna said. You look at our short history and see primitives. You look at our wars and see savages. She stepped closer, and for the first time the tall Valari stepped back. But every war we have ever fought has been for survival. We have been fighting since we climbed down from trees. We have been dying and adapting and surviving for millions of years. She turned and walked back to her soldiers. Behind her, Velos stood alone in the cold, staring at the impossible victory. That night, the report went out across the Velar military network. The human auxiliaries on Caro 7 had not died. They had won in command centers across the Empire. Valari officers read the report and felt something they had not felt in 3,000 years. They felt doubt. The news spread through the Valari Empire like fire through dry grass. On a frozen world at the edge of their territory, 200 primitive humans had done the impossible. They had defeated 30,000 Kreth with almost no losses. At first, many Valari refused to believe it. The reports must be wrong. The humans must have received help from a Valari unit. There had to be some explanation, but the evidence was clear. The ice shelf collapse. The enemy casualties. The human soldiers still alive and fighting. Something was changing, Admiral. Hyun Woo-beek had been a respected officer in the Korean Navy before the Valari came. He had commanded ships and led men into battle. He had studied military strategy for 30 years. The Valari assigned him to a supply depot on Nexus Station. They gave him a desk and told him to count boxes. To them, he was just another primitive, useful, only for simple tasks. Hyun-woo did not complain. He did not argue. He simply began to work. Within 3 days, he had identified 17 major problems in the Valari supply system. Their shipping routes were inefficient. Their inventory tracking was outdated. Their distribution network had gaps that left frontline units. Waiting for weeks for basic supplies, the Valari had been doing things the same way for so long that they had stopped looking for better methods. They were an ancient civilization, proud of their traditions. But their traditions were killing them. Hyun-woo reorganized the entire depot. He created new routes that cut travel time by 40%. He designed a tracking system that could predict supply needs before units ran out. He found ways to combine shipments that saved thousands of cargo trips. When the Valari commanders asked him how he had done it, he simply shrugged. "We have been fighting wars since we lived in caves," he said. "We learned that an army marches on its stomach. If your soldiers are hungry, they cannot fight. If they do not have ammunition, they cannot shoot." Simple things. Basic things. But important. The commanders stared at him. They had never thought of supply as important. They had always had more resources than they needed. Now, with the Kreth consuming their territory, they suddenly understood. Hyun-woo was promoted, and he was not alone. On the front lines, Yuna's unit had become famous. Other human auxiliaries heard about their victory and began to copy their methods. The rigid Valari tactics gave way to human creativity. Private First Class. Yoonji Song had been a biology student before the war. She spent her nights watching the Kreth instead of sleeping. She studied their movements, their patterns, their behavior. After 3 weeks, she made a discovery that changed everything. "They communicate with chemicals," she told Yuna one morning. "Pheromones. Their commanders release different scents to give orders. Attack. Retreat. Regroup." Yuna leaned forward. "Can we use that?" "I think so." Yoonji pulled out a small device she had built from broken equipment. "This can detect the pheromones from a distance. I can tell what orders they're receiving before they act on them." It was like reading the enemy's mind. Suddenly, human units could predict Kreth movements before they happened. Ambushes became easy. Retreats became unnecessary. The death rate for human auxiliaries dropped by 60%. Specialist. Jun Ho-kwan had been a video game developer before the war. He spent his free time creating tactical simulations on his datapad. "The Valari battle computers are too simple," he told Doyon. "They calculate based on numbers and positions. But war isn't just math. It's psychology. It's deception. It's knowing what your enemy is thinking." His simulations were better than anything the Valari had. He could predict battle outcomes with 90% accuracy. Soon, Valari commanders were asking for his advice instead of using their own systems. The humans were not just surviving. They were transforming. Counselor Thren watched these changes with growing unease. He had spent his career managing auxiliary species. He knew how primitives were supposed to behave. They were supposed to die bravely or run away in fear. They were not supposed to become essential. He requested a private meeting with Captain Doyon. They met in a small room on a Valari warship. Thren sat on one side of a metal table, Doyon on the other. The silver alien and the human officer studied each other in silence for a long moment. "Your species," Thren finally said, "was not supposed to be this." Doyon waited. "We have conscripted many primitive species over the centuries," Thren continued. "Some fought. Some fled. Some simply gave up and waited for death. But none of them adapted. None of them improved our methods. None of them made our commanders look like fools. Is that what we are doing?" Doyon asked. "Making you look like fools?" "Yes." Thren's voice was heavy. "Our supply lines are now run by your Admiral Beak. Our tactical predictions are now made by your specialist Quan. Your Lieutenant Park is being consulted before major offensives." He paused. "You were supposed to be acceptable losses, meat to throw at the Kreth. And instead we are winning your war." Thren nodded slowly. "Our council is divided. Some want to give humans more authority, more weapons, better equipment. They see your value and the others. The others are afraid." Thren's silver eyes met Doyin's human ones. "They look at what you have done in 3 months with outdated equipment and no support. They imagine what you could do with proper resources. And they wonder if we have made a terrible mistake." Doyon leaned back in his chair. "You dragged us from our homes. You gave us garbage weapons and sent us to die. You treated us like animals. Yes. Yeah. And now you are afraid of us." "Yes," Thren said again. "We are." Doyon stood up and walked to the small window. Outside, stars burned in the endless darkness. "Good," he said quietly. "You should be." Somewhere in the depths of space, the Kreth swarm was preparing its largest offensive. 12 hive ships were gathering, carrying millions of warriors. Their target was the Valari homeworld itself. The ancient empire was about to face its greatest test. And everywhere across their territory, humans were watching, waiting, and preparing. The Valari had thought they were using humanity as a weapon. They were beginning to realize that they had unleashed something they did not understand and could not control, and it was too late to put it back. The Kreth hive ships appeared at the edge of the Velar system without warning. 12 massive vessels, each one the size of a small moon, each one carrying millions of hungry warriors. For 3,000 years, no enemy had come this close to the Valari homeworld. For 3,000 years, Silver people had believed themselves untouchable. That belief died in a single moment. Admiral Hunwa Beak was in a meeting when the alarms started screaming. He ran to the command center and found chaos. Valari officers were shouting at each other, their silver faces twisted with fear. Display screens showed the approaching enemy fleet. Growing larger with every passing minute, the High Council had been called into emergency session. When Hunwa arrived, he found the most powerful leaders of the Valari Empire behaving like frightened children. "Our main fleet is scattered across 3 sectors," one counselor wailed. "It will take days to recall them. The orbital defenses are not ready," another shouted. "The upgrades were delayed. We have maybe 30% capacity. We should evacuate," a third suggested. "Flee to the outer colonies. Preserve what we can." Ganwu listened in silence. He had seen panic before, in human commanders facing impossible odds. He knew that panic killed more soldiers than any enemy. He also knew how to stop it. "Enough," he said. His voice was not loud, but somehow it cut through the noise. The counselors turned to look at him, their silver eyes wide with surprise. A human had never spoken to them this way before. "You have assets you are not using," Hyunwoo continued. "Your civilian ships can be armed. Your orbital stations have weapons that are offline but functional. Your population can be organized into defense units." Our population. A counselor looked horrified. "We cannot ask civilians to fight. They are not trained." "Neither were we," Hyunwoo said. "You took farmers and teachers and students from Earth. You gave us broken weapons and sent us to die. And we won." He stepped forward. "Now you will do the same with your own people, or you will watch your world burn." Counselors looked at each other. They were not used to being spoken to this way, but they were also not used to being invaded. "What do you want?" A senior counselor asked quietly, Hyunwoo told them. full authority over the defense. Human commanders given equal rank with Valari officers, technology and weapons shared without restriction, and when the war was over, full citizenship for every human who had fought. The counselors agreed to everything. They would have agreed to more. They were that desperate. The message went out to every human unit in the Empire. Come to VLR Prime. Come now. The final battle was about to begin. Unipark received the message on a transport ship heading back from the front lines. She read it twice, then gathered her soldiers. "They're giving us real weapons," she told them. "Real armor. Real ships. And they want us to defend their homeworld." Jisoo Han laughed. It was not a happy sound. 3 months ago, they were sending us to die in frozen trenches. Now they need us to save them, yes, Yuna said. That is exactly what they need. The human forces arrived at Villar Prime 2 days before the Kreth. In that time, they transformed the defense. Sergeant Taiwu Lee took charge of the ground fortifications. He looked at the Valari defensive walls and shook his head. They were beautiful and tall and completely wrong. "These are designed to look impressive," he said. "Not to stop enemies. You rebuilt them in 40 hours. Lower walls with better angles, hidden positions for crossfire, trenches and tunnels for movement." The Valari engineers watched in amazement as their ancient defenses were torn apart and put back together. Corporal Mingi Choi worked with Valari scientists to upgrade the orbital weapons. Their technology was advanced, but their tactics were outdated. She showed them how to link their systems together, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every approach. Specialist Junho Kwan built a command center that combined human creativity with Valari computing power. For the first time, defenders would be able to see the entire battlefield and respond in real time. And then the Kreth arrived. The hive ships filled the sky like dark clouds. Millions of drop pods fell toward the planet's surface, carrying the first wave of warriors. The ground shook with their landing. Yuna stood on the outer wall looking at the approaching swarm. Beside her stood Counselor Thren, who had requested to fight alongside the humans. "I have read your history," Thren said quietly. "Your wars, your disasters, your moments of greatest danger, and," Yuna asked, not taking her eyes off the enemy, "you'll always find a way. When everything seems lost, when all hope is gone, humans find something inside themselves. Something that refuses to accept defeat." He paused. "I never understood it. Until now, the Kreth hit the walls like a tsunami hitting a beach. The first wave died in the crossfire that Taiwu had designed. The second wave found the hidden trenches and was cut apart from angles they never expected. The third wave made it over the walls and met human soldiers in close combat. Jisoo Han fought for 6 hours without rest. Her rifle ran out of charge, and she picked up a Kreth blade. When that broke, she used her hands. She was 19 years old, and she killed until her arms could no longer move. Taiwu held a breach in the eastern wall with 40 soldiers. When the Kreth broke through, he collapsed the tunnel behind them and buried the enemy under tons of stone. 15 of his soldiers died, but the line held. Minji improvised weapons from destroyed equipment. She built bombs from power cells and shields from hull plating. When a Kreth commander broke through to the command center, she killed it with a welding torch. Do-Yeon Kim led the final counterattack. The Kreth had penetrated to the inner city, threatening the civilian shelters. Do-Yeon gathered every soldier he could find and pushed them back. He died holding a corridor for 3 minutes. While his soldiers retreated, 3 minutes that saved 12,000 civilians. When reinforcements finally arrived, now they found the humans still fighting. Exhausted, wounded, many of them barely able to stand. But fighting, the Kreth broke. Their hive mind could not understand an enemy that would not stop. An enemy that fought harder when they were losing. An enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every death. The surviving Kreth forces retreated to their ships. Of the 12 hive vessels that had attacked, only 3 escaped. On the blood-soaked walls of the Valari capital, humans and Valari stood together and watched the enemy flee. Yuna found Thren sitting alone in the ruins of a guard tower. His silver skin was covered in Kreth blood. His left arm was badly wounded. He was staring at the sky, You held, he said when she approached. Your species held against the largest Kreth force ever assembled? We did, Yuna agreed, and we paid for it. She thought of Doyan dead in a corridor. She thought of the hundreds of humans who had fallen during the battle. They had saved an alien world, and it had cost them dearly. The council wants to thank you, Thren said. They want to have ceremonies and give you medals. We don't want medals. Yuna's voice was hard. We want respect. We want our dead honored. We want to never be called primitive again. Thren nodded slowly. You will have all of that. And more. He looked at her. The Empire has never had allies. Only subjects and servants. But after today, I think we need to learn a new word. What word? Partners. Above them, the smoke from 100 fires rose into the sky. The battle was over. The war was not, but something had changed forever. The humans were no longer auxiliaries. They were no longer expendable. They were the reason the Valari Empire still existed, and everyone in the galaxy knew it. 6 months after the Battle of Velor Prime, the Kreth swarm surrendered. Their hive queens sent messages of submission across all frequencies. The war that had threatened to consume the galaxy was over. The humans had won it, not alone, of course. The Valari had fought and died alongside them. Other species had contributed what they could, but everyone knew the truth. When the Empire was about to fall, it was humans who had held the line. Counselor Thren stood before a memorial on Karo 7, the same frozen world where humans had first proved their worth. Now it held a monument of black stone carved with 2,000 names. Human soldiers who had died in the war. The wind was still cold. The sky was still gray. But Thren barely noticed. He was too busy reading the names, trying to understand the people behind them. Yuna Park walked up beside him. She wore a new uniform now, the dress whites of a Valari fleet admiral. She was the first human to hold such a rank. She would not be the last. I come here sometimes, Yuna said, to remember. Thren nodded. I understand. They stood in silence for a long moment. The wind carried snow across the memorial, dusting the carved names with white. We made a mistake, Thren finally said. His voice was heavy with something that sounded like shame. When we first came to your world, we looked at you and saw only what we wanted to see. Primitive creatures with short lives, animals that could be used and thrown away. And now I understand how wrong we were. Thren turned to face her. Your species has been at war since your beginning. You fought each other over land and resources and ideas. You created weapons that could destroy your entire planet. You came to the edge of extinction many times. This is supposed to be a compliment? Yes, Thren's silver eyes were intense. Because you survived. Every disaster, every war, every catastrophe, you survived. You did not have advanced technology to save you. You did not have other species to protect you. You had only yourselves. Yuna thought about human history, the ice ages, the plagues, the world wars. All the times her species had stood at the edge of the abyss and somehow found a way to step back. We are very good at not dying, she admitted. You are more than that. You adapt. You change. You take every challenge and turn it into strength. Thren shook his head. We Valari have been the same for 3,000 years. Same technology, same tactics, same way of thinking. We never needed to change because we were always the strongest, till the Kreth came. And suddenly we faced an enemy we could not defeat with our old ways. We were dying. Our empire was falling, and we were too proud to admit that we needed help. Yuna remembered those early days. The contempt in Valari eyes. The way they had treated humans like tools instead of people. So you conscripted us, she said. Cannon fodder to slow down the enemy. Yes. We expected you to die buying us time. Instead, you showed us how to fight, how to adapt, how to survive. Thren paused. You saved us by teaching us to be more like you. The memorial stood silent between them. 2,000 names. 2,000 humans who had died far from home fighting a war they had never asked for. The Council has approved the treaty, Thren continued. full citizenship for all humans in the Empire, representation in our government, technology sharing, reparations to your homeworld. I know. I helped negotiate it. There was something else. Something that was not in the official documents. Thren hesitated. I have spoken with the other species in the Empire. The ones we conscripted like we conscripted you. They are watching. They see how we have treated you. How we are changing because of you. And they want the same. Fair treatment, respect, partnership. Thren almost smiled. You have started something larger than you know. The Empire will never be the same. Yuna looked at the memorial. She thought of Doyen, who had died holding a corridor so others could escape. She thought of all the humans who had given everything for a war that was not theirs. Good, she said quietly. Let it change. Footsteps crunched in the snow behind them. Yuna turned to see familiar faces approaching. Ji Suhan, now a colonel, walked with the confidence of a soldier who had seen the worst and survived. Beside her was Tai Wu Li, his rough hands now marked with the scars of a dozen battles. Minji Choi followed, already working on something on her datapad. They had all been promoted. They had all been honored. But they still came to this frozen world to remember where it started. The transport is ready, Jisoo reported. The delegation from Earth has arrived. They want to discuss the reconstruction plans. Yuna nodded. Earth had been changed by the war too. The governments that had surrendered their people to the Valari were gone, replaced by new leaders who had risen from the veterans. A new era was beginning. There is one more thing, Thren said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. It showed a star map with several red points marked on it. What is this? The Kreth were not the only threat in the galaxy. There are others. Things beyond our borders that we have never faced. Things that make the Kreth look small. Thren handed her the device. The Council is afraid. They look at these threats and they see extinction. And they want our help. They need your help. We all do. Thren straightened, and for the first time, he looked at Yuna not as an inferior, or even as an equal, but as something more. The universe is vast and dangerous, Admiral Park. We thought we were the masters of our corner of it. We were wrong. Now we understand that survival requires more than power. It requires the ability to adapt, to change, to fight even when all seems lost. Those are human qualities, Taiwu said. Yes. Thren nodded. And that is why the galaxy needs humans. Not as auxiliaries, not as servants. As partners, as leaders. He paused. As the species that refuses to die. Yuna looked at her soldiers, her friends, her family forged in war. They had come so far from that transport ship where they had first been loaded like cargo. They had proved themselves in ways the Valari never expected, and now they were being asked to do it again. To face new threats, to protect not just themselves, but an entire empire that had once treated them as disposable. She should have been angry. Part of her was angry. The Valari had dragged humanity into a war that was not theirs. They had sent thousands to their deaths. They had treated an entire species as acceptable losses, but anger would not help the dead. Anger would not protect the future. Yuna extended her hand to Thren. It was a human gesture. He had learned what it meant. The reparations will be paid, she said. Our dead will be honored. Our people will be treated as equals. Thren took her hand. Yes. And in return, humanity will stand with the Empire against whatever comes. She gripped his hand firmly. Not because we forgive you, not because we forget, but because that is who we are. We protect, we defend. We fight for those who need us. Even those who have wronged you. Even those. Yuna released his hand. That is the difference between us and you, Counselor. You use others to survive. We protect others to survive. We make allies where you make subjects. She turned and walked toward the transport ship, her soldiers falling into step beside her. Behind them, Thren watched in silence. The Valari Empire had made a terrible mistake when they dragged humanity into their war. They had expected to use primitives as shields and then forget about them. Instead, It awakened something ancient and powerful, a species forged by millions of years of struggle, a people who did not know how to surrender, did not know how to accept death, did not know how to give up. They had wanted weapons. They had gotten something far more dangerous. They had gotten partners. And as the transport ship rose into the gray sky of Caro 7, carrying humanity's leaders toward a future no one could have predicted, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. The old order was ending. A new era was beginning. And at its center, refusing to die, refusing to break, refusing to be forgotten, stood humanity, ready for whatever came next.